All right, we are now broadcasting. Panelists, attendees are able to join, and I'm going to join us into the Facebook Live.
Kevin, we're still waiting on Streets LA.
Yes. Hello, I see some people are rolling in. Welcome. We're a bit early, so we'll just give us a little bit more time so people can join us. And so everybody knows we're doing this via Zoom. If you're joining us right now, you probably RSVP'd to the Eventbrite page and got information on how to join the Zoom. Thank you for joining us. And we're also on Facebook Live. We are streaming this on LADOT Livable Streets and also Councilmember Marquise Harris Dawson's Facebook page. So if you get cut out of here, you can't join for some reason, you can always join there. If you have a question, you can type it in on Facebook and we have people monitoring so that way we can get them answered here.
Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
We'll just give it a couple more minutes. Seems like we have some folks joining in who are calling in. Thank you for joining us. We're just giving it a couple more minutes for people to join, and then we'll get started probably around 6:05. All right, I see a couple more people have joined, so thank you all for joining us. We're just giving it a couple more minutes until we get underway here. Probably start around 6:05, so just hang out for a bit. Hello, everybody. We haven't quite started yet. We're just waiting for a couple more folks to roll in. Also, I'm trying to get this connected to our Facebook Live on Facebook. So let me just sort this out really quickly. Thank you all for joining us. Very excited to bring this presentation to you today. Just give it a couple more minutes and we'll get started. Thank you all for joining us. Looks like we have about 34 people so far who have joined us. So thank you all for coming. Getting our All right, just getting us set up on Facebook here. Thanks for bearing with us, folks. We'll get started really soon. Okay, looks like we're online. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining us today. So good evening and thanks for joining us. We've given people a couple of minutes now, and so I hope everybody's settled for the presentation on the Manchester Broadway Our Way project. And tonight we're doing this session in two sessions. Tonight we're doing this in English, and if there are any Spanish speakers or you know any Spanish speakers who would like to attend, we're doing it again tomorrow. And so right now I'd just like Albie from CD8 to translate that message for any of our Spanish speakers out there who may want to join tomorrow. Go ahead, Albie.
Buenas tardes a todos. Si usted desea participar en la versión español de esta presentación, tenemos una presentación mañana a la misma hora, que serían a las 6 de la tarde para todos aquellos que son hispanohablantes. En el cuadro del chat a mano derecha, mi colega está soltando el enlace para que se puedan registrar y acceder a la página para registrarse para mañana. So, por favor, reúnase con nosotros en el día de mañana a las 6 de la tarde.
Cool. Thank you so much, Albie. Thanks all. If I could get to go to the next slide. So as I stated, my name is Kevin Ocobillo, and I'm with the Los Angeles Department of Transportation's Office of External Affairs. And you'll hear from me throughout tonight's meeting. Aside from me, you'll be hearing a bit from Councilmember Marquise Harris-Dawson. Then you'll hear from Lauren Ballard and Andy Hall of LADOT's Vision Zero Division. And finally from Esmeralda Garcia of MIG Inc. And later on for the Q&A, we'll also have staff on hand from the Office of Councilmember Harris-Dawson, Streets LA, and LADWP. We really appreciate you joining us virtually tonight, whether that's on Zoom, Facebook, or the phone. We wish we could be with you in person to share this information and have meaningful dialogue with you around the project design. We are doing our best to communicate and welcome your suggestions via any platform for how we can better connect with you during this time. Go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to begin by sharing some city resources, and in particular, some of LADOT resources or information that's relevant to the COVID-19 epidemic that's currently happening today. For some general information on LADOT's coronavirus response, we encourage you to visit ladot.lacity.org/coronavirus. We also have two programs specifically for restaurants: Pickup and Delivery Zones and the LA Alfresco program. For small businesses, LA Care Corps can help with economic injury disaster loans and the Paycheck Protection Program. We encourage you to visit ewddlacity.com/index, PHP/LA Cares Corps for more information on that. And I'll be adding these links in the chat. So hopefully if you didn't get those the first time, we'll be repeating those a couple times throughout the presentation. Could I go to the next slide, please? Okay, cool. So for residents, we want to make sure that you are aware of our Slow Streets program. And prompted by the closure of neighborhood parks due to COVID-19, LADOT launched the Slow Streets program in mid-May of this year. Slow Streets allows community organizations to nominate a network of neighborhood streets for closures to non-local traffic, which provide residents a safe place to stay healthy, physically active, while socially distant. LADOT is prioritizing implementation and providing assistance to community organizations in dense, disadvantaged communities and neighborhoods of color. If you go to the next slide, please. And so before we get into it, please note that we are accepting and encouraging your questions. Audio and video for all attendees is muted to minimize any distraction. And if you want to ask a question, we encourage you to do so. Please enter your questions into the Q&A feature in Zoom if you're joining by Zoom. You should be able to see that at the bottom of your screens. There's a little Q&A icon that you can click there. And please don't hesitate to post any of those questions there. Don't use the chat box because we want to make sure that we get to all the questions. If you're viewing this presentation on Facebook, feel free to ask questions in the comment section, and we have staff on hand who will relay your questions into Zoom. And your third option is you could always email questions to vision0@lacity.org. And that's especially useful for those of you who are joining us by phone tonight. So we'll try to answer as many submitted questions as we can, and any questions we don't have time to get to tonight, we will follow up in a Q&A summary document that we'll send out via email to everybody who RSVP'd. We'll also post it on our website, the project website for this project, which is ladot.livablestreets.org/projects/Broadway. And again, we'll post all of these web links and everything that I'm saying right now in the chat. So that way you can get them there if you haven't written them down. So with those sort of housekeeping items out of the way, I'd like to bring a message to you from Councilmember Marquise Harris-Dawson.
In 2017, the community started a conversation about how to improve Broadway. Thanks to your dedication and hard work, we can begin major work to rebuild Broadway our way. This year's improvements are just the beginning. I ask that you continue to join us as we work to seek more investments to make Broadway a more beautiful, safer, and accessible street for our community.
Okay, I'll pick it up from here. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Thank you, Kevin and Councilmember Harris-Dawson. We're here today to talk about the Manchester Broadway Our Way project. The city is going to be implementing phase 1 of this project on July 8th. We're starting July 8th on Broadway between Manchester and Century. We're going to talk about the history of the Manchester Broadway Our Way project, why it's needed, who participated in developing the design, and why we're implementing the project in a few stages. Next, we'll look at the new safer street design coming to Broadway and share with you what you can expect during construction, including parking restrictions. We'll share the timeline for the final phase of the installation of the Manchester Broadway Our Way project and opportunities for you to get involved in the design of the median park. Finally, we'll open the floor for questions at the end. So first, to talk about the background of the project. So I assume that many of you on the call are well aware of some of these pieces of the background, but the project's a long time in the making. In 2017, the city designated Broadway a priority corridor on the high injury network due to the high number of severe injury and fatality crashes. Between 2008 and 2018, 34 people were killed or severely injured on this 2.2-mile section of Broadway, just between Manchester and Imperial Highway. And almost 60% of those people were walking or riding bicycles. So let's take a moment to talk about why Broadway experiences more than its fair share of crashes that severely hurt or kill people. One of the major reasons is excessive speeding and excessive speed differentials, meaning that people are driving at different speeds. This is made possible by the fact that there are 3 travel lanes in each direction, and people are able to go fast and weave around other drivers that they feel aren't going fast enough. This creates an unsafe environment for all road users, but especially for people walking and biking. The speed limit on Broadway is 40 miles per hour, but people often go faster than that. And here's why that matters. If a person driving hits a person walking going 20 miles an hour, that person has about a 90% chance of surviving the collision. But at 40 miles per hour, the person has about a 20% chance of surviving the crash. As a city, we have a duty to keep people safe while they travel, no matter whether they're walking, biking, or driving, or taking transit. And a safer road design can go a long way towards making sure that people get where they're going safely. So for that reason, between June 2017 and April 2018, the Office of Council Member Harris Dawson and Streets LA conducted focus groups, surveys, walk audits, presentations, and different community events to engage residents in the process. And the resulting design was intended to make Broadway safer, more beautiful, greener, and would provide active community uses in the median. In June 2018, the Office of Councilmember Harris Dawson and Streets LA, which is one of our sister city departments, submitted an application with the State of California's Active Transportation Program to help fund this transformative project. And the rendering on the left of this screen illustrates that project design. After a year of review, the state awarded the project $26.9 million in grant funding, and the final design process began. But we know that major projects like this one take time to design and to construct. So in the fall of 2019, the Office of Councilmember Harris Dawson directed LADOT to design a quick build version of the project to make Broadway as safe as possible, as soon as possible. And that's the project that we're here to talk about today, this quick build safety project. I'm gonna take a break here from our timeline to really just talk about the project goals for that project. First, we wanna immediately improve street safety along the corridor for all users of the street, people walking, biking, driving, and taking transit. This is a request that community members, the neighborhood council, and other folks have made of the city. They've said we can't wait for the eventual Manchester Broadway Our Way project. Several years down the road, they said we needed a safer Broadway ASAP. And second, we want to pilot the street design that's coming as a part of the Manchester Broadway Our Way project, which will break ground in 2023. By using materials like paint and plastic dividers, LADOT can install the proposed design quickly and then evaluate what works and what might need to be adjusted. Okay, so back to the timeline. The global COVID-19 pandemic has had a tremendous impact on all of us, including the way that the city does its business. And so during the Safer at Home order, Streets LA, the city's department in charge of street resurfacing, developed a program called ADAPT. ADAPT fast-tracked a lot of street repair and repaving projects on major streets while traffic was lower, which allowed Broadway to be resurfaced. And this is really important because whenever we install a safety project that involves a bike lane, we need to make sure that the pavement is of high quality so that we don't create an unsafe situation for people biking. And that brings us to today, July 1st, 2020. We're in the middle of socially distant outreach right now, including this presentation. We've sent several mailers as a city, dropped off flyers with senior housing facilities, and sent some email blasts and made some calls to community organizations and residents along the corridor. So these next two slides really get at the construction schedule that you'll see over the next 9 months. From July to August, the first phase of the Manchester Broadway Our Way project will be installed on Broadway between Manchester Avenue and Century Boulevard. And so in order to do that, first Streets LA will come in and repave the road, and then LADOT will install the new paint and bollards. At the same time, from July through December, the Department of Water and Power will be constructing a new water pipeline on Broadway between Century and 109th. Once that project concludes, likely beginning in around January of 2021, Streets LA will then come back, repair the pavement from Century to Imperial, after which LADOT will install the safety project. And at that time, that'll be the conclusion of this quick build version of the Broadway Our Way project. So this next slide is just an illustration of what I just talked about. So just those different phases of the project. So from July to September, Streets LA and LADOT will be doing the work from Manchester to Century. And at the same time, a little bit on a longer project timeline, from July to December, LADWP will be doing their water pipeline construction from Century to 109th Place. And then once that project concludes, we'll come back in January and finish the project from Century to Imperial. So now that we have a little bit better understanding of the project timeline ahead of us, let's talk about the safer street design that's coming this summer to Broadway. We're going to focus on the first phase of implementation that begins this month on Broadway between Manchester and Century. And so that's sort of a zoom in on the right of that project area. So if you regularly use Broadway, you'll recognize these cross sections. For Manchester to Century, there are 3 travel lanes in each direction with parking on both sides of the street against the curb. But the street is different starting at around 92nd and 93rd. So north of 92nd, you have a street that looks something like this. You have no bike facility and no center median, except for in some sort of small places like that you can see down here, except for I just covered over that. So south of 93rd, you have 160 foot wide right of way with a 40-foot median in the center. And you also have a bike lane. Excuse me. So here's another look at Broadway from above in the wider section where the median is. And once again, you can see there's a parking lane against the curb on either side of the street, a bike lane between the parking and the 3 travel lanes, and 3 travel lanes in each direction. So how will this look like? How will the street look once the final project is installed in several years? Well, here's a rendering that was developed a couple of years ago as part of the grant application and that initial phase of outreach. And so it'll look something like this. This is the project that will break ground in 2023 and will be constructed using those major local and state funds. In the future of Broadway, there is a protected bike lane against the curb. It's protected from moving traffic by concrete and planters with trees and plants, as well as by a line of parked cars. And to make room for the protected bike lane and to calm vehicular traffic, the number of lanes is reduced from 3 in each direction to 2 in each direction. And so we know that this is a typical street design that is proven to be much safer than the existing conditions. So here's another look at the future of the Manchester Broadway Our Way project from a slightly different angle. This one, we're on the ground, we're in an intersection, and we're looking towards one side of the block. Again, we see a protected bike lane against the curb, and it is protected by a parking lane and landscaping. And we also see 2 travel lanes in each direction and curb extensions that shorten the distance people need to cross the street, making it much safer for people walking. And the median acts as a park with additional landscaping and stormwater capture, as well as public art and other amenities. So this is the long-term feature of the project, but the near-term project looks a little different, but it should look familiar. So this is a sample of the design that it will be installed over the next several months. So just like in the Manchester Broadway Our Way project, there's a protected bike lane next to the sidewalk. The bike lane is separated from vehicle traffic by the parking lane, which is pulled out away from the curb. And in between the parking lane and the bike lane is a buffer space with those vertical plastic bollards. There are 2 travel lanes in each direction, and at driveways and intersections, there will be green paint to help raise awareness of potential conflicts between people driving and biking. So here's another style of graphic that will be posted along Broadway to help people get used to the new street configuration. People biking should do so in the new bike lane that's against the curb, and people parking and loading will park in the designated spaces in between the bike lane and the driving lane. And it's really important that when people park in these spaces and walk to the sidewalk, that they're mindful of people biking. And people biking should also be mindful that people may be parking and needing to cross the bike lane to reach their destination. People driving should be mindful of people parking and exiting their vehicles, and people driving who are making turns should always check for people biking and people crossing in the crosswalk, of course. So the new design will have some impact on street parking, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Andy to talk a little bit more about the details of that.
Thanks, Lauren. So as Lauren mentioned, with all the pros that come with the project, such as the safety improvements, the beautification, the various other aspects of it, the connectivity of the bike lane, there are some cons, and the main one for this project is the parking loss. So as you can see from the numbers here, there is about 200 existing spaces along the corridor of Broadway. We are projected to lose about 88 or 90 spaces on the corridor, and that's about a 45% loss. And we with about 110 spots left after the project is complete. And the main reasons for the loss of that parking is whenever we come through and change the striping around or resurface a street, we need to update it to the newest safety standards. And since Broadway had been put in and the striping had been changed, the city and other various national or safety standards have been updated that we need to update the street to. Mainly those deal with sight distance and various other aspects that add red curb into the project. Another reason for the parking loss is with the protected bike lane. When we have driveways or intersections, there is additional red curb that needs to be added for visibility. Same thing with the bus zones and the right turn zones. Red curb is needed to be added due to get the turning vehicles and the buses out of the through travel lanes. And we'll give you some examples coming up of all those. So for the first thing that we mentioned, the visibility coming in and out of the driveways and the side streets. As you can see, the red to the left of the red car, there's a larger buffer area where there's only the 2 blue parked cars, as opposed to the right side, there's more parked cars. This is needed because you need to have visibility to see cars that are coming down the street before you can turn onto the street. So you need to have a little bit more space that way so that red car can see the green car that's coming along. The next slide, please. Another reason why we're having parking loss is due to Because the bike lane is against the curb and there will be cars parked between the bikes and the travel lane, there needs to be a gap in the parked vehicles before the side streets, so that any bicyclists who are coming along can be seen by the drivers in the cars. And same thing with people crossing the street. We can't block their sight, or we can't block them from being seen by the cars who are driving. So in this example, the red car who's coming along needs to have that space where the white dots and there's the no parking there to be able to see the bicyclist in the bike lane and to see the person crossing the street. If we had parked cars all the way up to the side street, they wouldn't be able to see those people, and they could potentially hit them as they're if they take the corner too, or if they take the corner without being able to see them. And another reason that we have some issues, or we have the red parking loss, is due to the bus zones and the right turns at signalized intersections. We have this kind of different style of right turn zone as opposed to the one that you saw on the last slide. This is mainly due to increased volume or more cars that are turning at that intersection, and buses that are coming out of the travel way and stopping alongside the road. The reason that we have this style is to get those turning vehicles out of the through lanes and getting them in a space that they can safely wait and merge with the bicyclists who are coming along, or wait for the bikes to pass through before they enter that right turn lane. Same thing with the buses, they'll get out of the travel lane and move over to the side. And this, it increases safety of the different vehicles and modes of transportation, and it increases the throughput of the vehicles going through the corridor. So you won't be stuck behind a bus that's stopped alongside the curb, and you won't be stuck behind somebody who's waiting for somebody to cross in the crosswalk while they're to turn right onto the side street, and you can continue along the corridor. Next slide. And then here we just have an example of the parking loss per block. We can bring this up later also in the Q&A section if anybody wants a little bit more information about the losses per their specific location. One location that I wanted to highlight, you see the larger numbers between Manchester and 87th or 88th Street on the left side, which is the west side of the street. The reason we have increased loss in that area as opposed to the rest of the corridor is that we wanted to have connectivity between the Broadway bike lane and the Manchester bike lane that will be going in later on. And the only way to do that is to eliminate parking along the west side of the street due to some various issues with the geometry of the street and the way that the roadway narrows after Manchester. This was the only way that we'd be able to do it. We can't have a share style of bike lane where the bikes share the street with the vehicles due to the 40-mile-per-hour speed limit on the street. We can't do that with the shares. So that's the main impact of that's the main grouping of the parking loss for the corridor, but the rest of it is just spread out slightly throughout the rest of it, the rest of the corridor.
Sorry, everybody. I was having some trouble unmuting myself. Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
So, I mean, we know that it's tough to hear about parking impacts, but we do want to reiterate that this is a street design that will save lives and reduce severe injuries due to traffic crashes for a number of reasons, and these are just a few of them. First, reducing the number of travel lanes makes it more likely that people will drive more slowly, which means that even if a crash occurs, they're less likely to cause death or severe injury. And we can, refer back to this graphic that we talked about earlier, where speed really makes all the difference in whether someone lives or dies in a traffic crash. We also know that with two fewer vehicle travel lanes, that people crossing the street have to navigate fewer travel lanes and have fewer potential conflict points, and just a generally more comfortable crossing experience. And then finally, protected bike lanes have been shown to reduce crashes between people biking and driving by up to 94%. So it's really the safest possible configuration for people biking. So it has that huge benefit. So now we can talk about some of the just kind of general construction impacts and what you can expect. So this is just generally that graphic that I showed earlier that kind of recaps the overall project schedule. So what we're really talking about here is this July to September of 2020. So starting July 8th, Streets LA will be resurfacing Broadway from Manchester to 93rd. And that'll take, a few days. And it'll look something like what you see in this photo. Then starting July 10th, they are going to be resurfacing Broadway from 93rd to Century on the northbound side, east of the median. Then starting July 13th, they're gonna hop over to the southbound side or the side that's west of the median. Once that work is complete, LADOT is going to come in and install the safety project. So just depending on how long the Streets LA work takes, that's when we'll be coming back. And it may take a few days between those two projects, but we'll be coming back and striping the roadway with the new safety project and installing the bollards. It's really important to be aware of any no parking signs that you see during construction. Vehicles will be towed if they are in the area of construction. They're parked in the area of construction during the work. So there will be signs that are posted in advance. So please just make sure you're looking out for those. They're posted at least 24 hours before work begins. So tell your neighbors, your friends to look out for those. And then finally, or not quite finally, but there are 3 different departments that are doing this work, and they all have different contact information and are responsible for different parts of the project. And we know that for the most part, no one but city employees really cares about or knows about the differences between the departments. But if you are, able to recognize, oh, that's street resurfacing, or that's, a plastic bollard being installed, and you want to talk specifically about that, these are your contacts. But you can also always just contact us at LADOT if you notice work being done that you want to talk about, and we can connect you to the right folks. And so before we transition to the Q&A, I'll turn it over to Esmeralda with MIG to talk about upcoming community efforts, community design efforts around the Median Park.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Hello to everyone. I see some of the names in the participant list and glad to see that there are folks who are coming back. We're glad to be working with the team once again to implement the vision that was shared by the community members during the first phase. As Lauren shared some of the images that she has there, the one on the right where, again, thinking very visionary, when we went out to the community, the concepts were generated around public art and amenities along the median. And so now in this phase, we're going to look at more specific design details. So we're going to come out to you and share with you some possibilities and get your input on those. So look out for information that we'll be sharing with you. We're going to be working with community leaders and partners to make sure that we do meetings like this digitally and that we can bring in folks to provide their input that way. But we also want to find ways that we can work with you to go out into the communities, again, respecting social distancing and working with you to elicit input into those ideas. So really excited to be back. And so we'll see you soon. And thanks for letting us introduce ourselves.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lauren and Esmeralda, for the information. I know that it's a lot for people to digest. And so I want to encourage people to type any questions that they have in the Q&A function. I see a couple there, but just a quick house announcement. If you do have any questions and you're joining us by Zoom, feel free to add those in the Q&A section in Zoom. If you're watching the presentation on Facebook, go ahead and drop your question in the comment section, and we have staff monitoring that, and they can send those questions over to us. So, and then also I see a couple folks who are joining by phone. If you have a question right now and you're able to email either through your phone or through the computer, you can email us at vision0@lacity.org. Again, that email address is vision0@lacity.org. So we have the rest of the time until 7:30 to answer questions. So this is really your time, folks. If you're out there and you're joining us, please ask us questions. We want to use this time wisely, and since you're here, we can take advantage. So I'll go ahead, and I see a couple of questions have rolled in through the Q&A, and then I know there were a couple that we received before, so we can get through those. The first question is from Rita Rubin, and her question is about parking loss, and she's asking, to mitigate loss of parking, why not use every other middle aisle for parking like they have in Gardena? I have been to funerals at churches and the mortuary in the area and never had any place to park. Broadway and open space will be underutilized because of public safety in the area. Please consider those who live in the area and not just what you feel is best. So I think if we could maybe, this might be a question for Lauren and Andy about the possibility of using the median island for parking.
Hi, Rita. Thank you. That was a great question and a good example, or a good idea to utilize the median islands for the parking. That can be something that can come when we do the full build out of the project. Right now, since we're just doing striping, we aren't doing any civil work, so we're not building those concrete bump outs and the stuff that Lauren mentioned. But when we do have that portion of the project go in, this is definitely something that we can incorporate. We could either do it how you mentioned, using the entire island as parking, or do it in a different style where, as opposed to you have a parking lane on your right-hand side, you can do a sort of reverse bump out where you take a lane's width of roadway from the median island and then have parking on the left-hand side of the street also, since we do have essentially one-way streets that are separated by that median island. So that's something good that we can write down, and we'll definitely try to include it in our project coming along.
Thanks, and I just want to make a clarification. It's Robert Rubin, not Rita. I think he's using his wife.
Oh, sorry about that, Robert.
That's okay. I read it as Rita, but yeah. Esmeralda, did you want to say something? No. Okay. So Robert's also asking about when he was first approached about the project. It was Vermont to Broadway was included, no mention at all. So I don't know if this might be a question for CD8 or for MIG about the original scope of the project, but maybe Albie or Lamont, you might be able to tell us sort of how this project was originally envisioned and sort of the geography, why Manchester and Broadway and this area.
Yeah, hi, Robert Rubin. Good to hear that you're on. This is Albie. The project is called Manchester Broadway Our Way because the long-term project includes the redesigning and revitalizing of Manchester as well, between Vermont and Broadway. So MIG, here represented by Esmeralda Garcia, has led some incredible workshops that you've been a part of at some point. So that is still going. Now, the issue that we're tackling now is, in the meantime, as we wait for the for the big project, we are wanting to mitigate the traffic issues that we see on Broadway. So, that's why we're focusing on Broadway today. I'm not sure if Lamont or Esmeralda want to add anything else.
That's correct, LB. We did look at on Manchester from Vermont all the way to Broadway. So that was one segment. So that was that arterial going from west to east. And then the Broadway section was another. And in the conversations we had with the community, there was input on both. And we also looked at the metro station, the underpass, and there were some concepts that emerged from the community conversation there, as well as bike access. And we looked at different solutions for that area as well. But yes, the focus right now is, and the work that we're part of now is the median on Broadway.
Thank you for that. So we had a question come in. This is about how to use the bike lanes, and this was from one of the seniors that we had a conversation with earlier in the week. They're asking, are seniors with motorized wheelchairs permitted to use the bike lane? So maybe Lauren or Andy, if you guys might be able to answer that one.
Kevin, I'm not sure on the answer of the legality of using the bike lane with a motorized scooter. I would think that they would need to stay on the sidewalk, but I'm not sure on that.
Okay. We have a question from Itzel Ronson. Itzel's asking, are there plans to establish crossing lights and traffic lights? While I think limiting the number of lanes is great, it will take a while for the community to adopt the reduction, and adding a street light can help with this transition. Additionally, adding a crossing light can help protect pedestrians. So maybe Lauren, you could answer if the project includes design for crossing lights or other pedestrian amenities.
Yeah, I would actually like to ask about the project team for the eventual project, if that does in fact include new pedestrian beacons and things of that nature. The folks who applied for all that money that the project was awarded. Any thoughts, you guys? Why don't we come back to that question? I'll make a note and check and see if LADOT has any.
I can speak to that question. I'm sorry.
Great.
Hey everyone, my name is Lamont Cobb. I work with Albie for the council member's office. So Itzel, for your question, yes, that will most likely be part of the larger project that's going to start in 2023. So this project is kind of putting in those immediate improvements to the street itself. So when we're talking about new lights, new crossing areas, that is something we will be looking at, but that'll be part of the larger project that starts in a couple of years.
Okay. All right, thanks for that, Albie. Jackie says, this is a great project that will provide safer travel for families riding their bikes. Can you talk a little bit more about the connectivity opportunities this brings, either existing or in the future? Can somebody talk about how this project might connect or add new bike lanes, or connect both sort of the immediate project or even the future Broadway project?
Sure. I mean, I think there's opportunities in the future to either continue the Broadway project in the northern direction, and I believe there's intentions to connect to Manchester bike facilities as well.
Right, I know, from what I know about the project, Broadway in Manchester is really to be sort of an intersection, and the connectivity there. What's happening on Broadway right now is really sort of just the first phase of improvements that will happen. As Lamont and Albie and Esmeralda had alluded to, there's a larger effort to do a whole streetscape project on Manchester and on Broadway. And so I know there will be connectivity operations there as well.
Yeah, it's also really important for us to make that connection. So one is the Silver Line that goes along the 110 freeway. So this will give direct access to bikers to the Silver Line. And then once we finalize the project that also includes Manchester, it will connect folks or bikers to the Vermont line, which is one of the most trafficked. So there's a really good opportunity for people to use public transportation and bike places, which a lot of our community does.
Thank you. And so I guess connected to that, John is asking, is there any plans for a project to come south of Century?
Hi, Kevin, this is Andy. Yeah, the project will be going south of Century once the DWP work that Lauren had mentioned is finished. Then it will continue all the way down to Imperial Highway.
Gotcha.
Right. So the exact same project conditions will continue south.
Okay. Yeah. So what I understand is this is the first half of the project, and once LADWP has completed the work that they need to do under the road, sort of the same order of operations will happen. Streets LA will come in and repave the road or make any necessary repairs, and then LADOT will come in with the same type of configuration and carry it all the way down the corridor.
Yeah, it was our original intention to put the corridor together, all the strapping together as one, this north and the southern portions that we're talking about. But just due to that DWP work that's there, we decided to split it up so we were able to get the benefits in the northern portion put in earlier, as opposed to waiting for the entire project to be put in as once.
Got you. All right, thanks. So it looks like we have a question coming in from Facebook. Ari Gallardo, he's asking, how does the city expect the surrounding community to catch up with the beautification of Broadway? Seems like this is similar to what was done on Vermont. On Vermont, there is currently homeless people living in the center dividers, and the street doesn't seem any more walkable. The businesses and residential areas didn't change or seem to be part of the beautification. How will Broadway be any different? Or is this project only targeting changing the flow of traffic on Broadway? The slide provided with statistics on accidents didn't address the deaths that were due to people jaywalking versus using crosswalks and people's use of their bicycles. Okay, so there's a couple of things in here. Maybe we can talk about the last, Lauren, could you clarify the last statement where they're asking about the slide that provides the statistics on accidents? Could you maybe talk a little bit about what's being represented on that slide and maybe even bring that up?
Sure. Okay, we're gonna have to run through. Sorry.
So I think it's a really good question, and thank you for bringing that up, Ari, because it's really important for folks, I think, to understand how LADOT is gathering the data and how we're using the data to inform sort of the design and the decisions we're making about infrastructure.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just say that the 34 people who were killed or severely injured that are captured here is all people. So no matter what the preceding action was prior to the fatal or severe injury crash. And the distinction here is that at LADOT we have, and really as a city, we've shifted our approach to being one where we support all road users and design a safer street for everybody. And so that includes, you know, if there's a lot of people who are traditionally what we call jaywalking at a certain block that doesn't have an existing crossing, we would move to provide a new crossing. Or if people are biking in a way that is, you know, where vehicles are nearby, we want to provide a safe place for them to bike. And so it's really a harm reduction approach where we accept that everybody's going to make mistakes at some point on the street. I know I do. I assume most of us on this call make mistakes. And the goal here is really that mistakes aren't fatal or don't cause a severe injury that changes someone's life. And so we really want to design a street that supports our community, or, you know, and any community, and is, yeah, safe for all road users. So we kind of stay away from, you know, blaming people in their own, or for the crashes, and really get back to a safe system. So we want a safer street for everybody that supports all people who are using the street. So I guess that's just clarifying that. And then the 59% of the 34 people who were killed or severely injured on Broadway were walking or riding a bike. And the reason why that's so significant is that way fewer than 59% of people are involved in, or like 60% of people are involved, who are walking or riding a bike are involved in crashes. And so we see them overrepresented in the number of crashes that are happening, or their share of crashes, which means that they're particularly vulnerable to crashes that cause or that result in death or severe injury. And so it's really important that we protect the most vulnerable users of our streets, because when we do that, we make everybody safe. So just that's a point of clarification.
Awesome, thank you, Lauren. And then so to the second part of the three-part question, I guess, is sort of what's the plan for the median? Is the median, it sounds like Ari might be, can foresee a situation where the median becomes a place for people to camp out or not an active use. I know that's not covered as part of the LADOT safety project, but maybe somebody from CD8 or MIG might be able to talk about what the plan is for the median.
Sure, I can speak to that. So we'll be starting an engagement process to talk with you all about the best way to address what we want to see in the median, and kind of really think about and discuss how we talk about how we want to manage folks who may be homeless or unhoused, and try to go into that space and figure out how the best ways that we can use different design techniques. What can we do to make sure it's something that's both inviting to the community and also not necessarily a place, where the homeless will necessarily, or we'll see large encampments. And I think there's ways to do that, and we're gonna kind of have that discussion and involve that discussion with you all over the next couple of months as we think about what we want the median to look like.
Great, thanks. Okay, awesome. So let's get to some of the other questions. I really thank you all for being so lively and participating. I'm glad the ice has been broken now and really getting into some really good questions here. We have a question from, and I might be mispronouncing your name, so I'm sorry, Elida Mendez, and her question and concern are, does this project include the street cleaning signs? What is the plan to keep the street clean? There's an empty lot on 86th Place and 87th. Does anybody know who is in charge to make a change on that location? So I'm not sure if somebody from Streets LA is here to talk about the street cleaning, or can answer that question.
Hi, it's Michael Cox from Streets LA. I'm not with the cleaning division, and what their plans are for street cleaning on Broadway at this present point in time, I'm not 100% sure. I do know at one point they were doing bike lanes as far as cleaning. So they purchased smaller sweepers that would actually fit in the bike lanes to clean them. But some of my counterparts, I can pose that question to them, and they can get back to them, the CD8 group there, with that answer.
Great, thank you. And CD8 or Michael, do you know if street sweeping currently occurs on Broadway?
It does not.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we have another question. We'll just keep going through here. This one's from Kent Strumpel. To make up for parking loss, could you consider adding diagonal parking on some of the side streets between the alley and Broadway, enabled by making those segments one-way exiting onto Broadway? Inglewood has installations like this on some side streets along Manchester in the vicinity of Crenshaw. So perhaps maybe we can get an LADOT engineer or planner to talk about, have we looked at potentially introducing angled parking on some of the side streets or making those one way?
I can't. This is Andy with LADOT. I'm one of the design engineers for Vision Zero. That's a good question to pose to put the angled parking in. One thing to do with that, like you mentioned, with the one exit onto Broadway, that's something that you have to look into pretty carefully due to circulation for, like, say, trash trucks or emergency vehicles or something like that. But it's definitely something that we can look into for the project, and thank you for bringing that up.
Great. Okay, this one's from Mrs. Rutledge. Mrs. Rutledge is asking, is planned lighting on Broadway designed for a safe, bright, and inviting situation for walking to our businesses in the evening? So this sounds like a streetscape question, and maybe Esmeralda or somebody from CD8 might be able to take this on a lot better.
Sure. Hi, Mrs. Rutledge. We will be looking at lighting for the larger project. That was part of the discussions with the community over the past few years. And that would come in, of course, with the long-term project for Broadway that we are actively looking for grants and other sources to help us fund. But that will not necessarily be part of this project that's going to be happening this summer. But we definitely want to look at lighting, definitely want to look at that as a tool for public safety. And that's going to be part of the larger project that will begin in 2023.
Okay. One concern that I know I've seen is around parking. And so Mrs. Rutledge is also, it seems this is more of a comment, but maybe this is an opportunity to discuss parking. She says, we don't have enough parking now on Broadway. Please work on getting a public lot ready to accommodate safe, free parking with dash bus travel to Broadway businesses. So that's a comment from Broadway. And I did see some folks from the Facebook comments chime in about parking. And so if Lauren or Andy, maybe you guys could delve deeper into some of the need for the parking loss and maybe what the trade-offs are in terms of for parking in terms of safety, real quick.
So like what Kevin mentioned, one of the needs for the parking loss is mainly due to the reason that it's one of the needs for the parking is due to the protected bike lane that's up against the curb now. Currently, there's the bike lane that for some of the portion of Broadway that's away from the curb, so parking can be up against it. But with this new protected bike lane that's much safer, as Lauren had mentioned in the presentation, there needs to be additional visibility and clear spaces that are included so that the bicyclists and pedestrians, like are shown on the slide right now, don't get hit by turning vehicles that are going into side streets or driveways, like we had shown on the presentation before. And then to get that clear space, we have to remove some parking, because before the vehicles will be able to park further up, closer next to the driveways, because they weren't worried about that additional visibility that's needed.
Right. So it sounds like the parking loss is really there to accommodate all of the safety improvements and to ensure that we're able to place the pedestrian and the bicyclists, or the folks that we know from the statistics are the ones disproportionately getting severely injured or killed on Broadway, that their safety is put up there. So thank you for that explanation.
Yeah, exactly. The reason that we're doing this is to improve the safety for it. We wouldn't remove parking just because we wanted to, or wanted to make it look cleaner or anything like that. The reason that we do it is for the safety aspect.
Awesome. Also, I think it's important to reiterate too, is that, you know, LADOT's designs are really sort of a placeholder for the larger streetscape improvement that we'll see coming down the line, in terms of the trees and the concrete and all of the new pavement that's going to happen. So I think that it's a sort of a transition to help the community warm up to that eventual change that's going to happen, and really make Broadway a safer, more connected and active corridor, which I think is really consistent with the outreach and what folks have found in the visioning process that MIG led in the past. Okay, so we got a couple more questions, and folks, don't be shy if you got some questions. We still got a lot of time to get to them. Let's see, we have one from anonymous attendee. This might be more of a question for CD8. It's on Broadway between 86th and 87th. There's 2 empty parking lots. What's going to happen with that? They've been making parties there, and I think they should do something better with it or close it down. So vacant lot issue at 86 and 87.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. That lot is a DOT lot off of 86 on the east side of Broadway. Senior lead officer Steve Muther has been really involved with that lot. Every time he comes in, he goes by there and makes sure that it's safe. But we've had incidents there, and it's currently unsafe. And I agree with you. It's something that needs to be worked on. And we have reached out to folks from DOT on their real estate side to address the issue. But it's bigger than that, in my opinion. You know, it's the lot across the street from that one, which is a privately owned lot that currently has an encampment, and the lot west, on the west side of Broadway, that has, one side has been recently fenced with iron fence per our request, but the other side is still open to the public. So it's something that has been difficult to deal with from our end, just dealing with the private owners. But LADOT has been helpful in doing what they can with that lot. But I agree with you. We have to work on it on the public safety side of things, as well as just the aesthetics.
Okay, thank you for that. This is a transit question, and Itzel Ronson is asking, are the bus schedules and paths being affected by these changes?
The short answer is no.
Okay, cool. And then we have another question from Cordell Clark. Is a facelift for businesses going to be necessary, and will there be anything available to finance that? So I think this is a little bit outside of the scope of what we're talking about today, but maybe Albie or Lamont, you might be able to speak to any grants or anything, facelift program that businesses could take advantage of on Broadway.
Sure. Like Kevin was saying, this project is really focused on infrastructure. So it's really looking at, our streets and eventually our sidewalks and the median park. So it's not necessarily going to be looking at any type of investment on private property. I think there are some resources available, particularly for our business owners who are kind of dealing with the COVID crisis. And I do think you're absolutely right in the fact that we would like to see more investment, private investment in the corridor to help our business owners kind of redo facades, update equipment, and those types of things. And those are things that we are always open ears to looking for different sources, different grants for that. If there are business owners that are looking for those types of help or technical assistance, they can definitely reach out to our office, and we'll be happy to connect you with resources and different organizations that can help you think through those changes.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Lamont. So I do want to, we do have a representative from Streets LA here who can talk more directly about the immediate impacts of construction, and we did receive some questions on that. So Michael, I'm going to direct these next couple of questions at you. What are the daytime construction hours? Will no parking signs be posted, and will parking be allowed when work day hours have ended? So when the crews are no longer there? And I guess we can start there. Maybe you can talk about sort of the construction schedule and the impacts on parking, what people can expect on a daily basis.
Okay, sure. During the days of construction, our hours, our crews start as early as 6:30 in the morning. And at that present point in time, they're just kind of getting things set up and whatnot. We are going to have no parking signs posted at least 24 hours prior to us starting our work. We are going to notify the residents prior to us being there. 5 days before we come out, we send out a notice stating which days we're going to be there. We also have been doing a day before letter to remind the constituents that we're going to be there on that day. So generally, they'll really get started working by 7 in the morning. And it depends on how the day goes. They could run a little late. When I say a little late, they might be an hour or two. Usually they're done at 3 o'clock, but they may take another hour, hour and a half to finish up something, to complete something for the next day. So the next day is a little smoother. There will be no parking on the street during the days we're doing our construction. However, once we leave and we're done for the day and all of our cones are up out the streets, they'll be able to resume parking on the street for that day. But they're going to have to be moved out of the way by the next morning when we begin our work.
Awesome, thank you for that. And I know that you mentioned you're sending out notices to residents. Can residents expect something on their windshield or in their, like a door hanger, or what type of a notice would that be like?
We're definitely going to do a flyer on the door. Sometimes on large scale projects like this one here, when we have numerous cars, we see numerous cars parked, we will do the flyer on the door and a flyer on the windshield of the vehicle. So I'm probably going to recommend to our team that we not only do the flyer on the door, but we're going to really put the notices on the cars to just kind of flood it with information so people know and understand when we're coming.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, I know that'll be helpful. When we've talked to some folks in advance, we know that sometimes folks park maybe 2 or 3 blocks away from where they live. So it's good to hear that Streets LA will be out there aggressively with the flyering. Let me see, we have one last question that we received earlier this week. We still have some time, folks, so if you want to ask your question, please drop that in there. This question was from one of the seniors that we talked to earlier this week. They're asking if the governor or mayor shut down all businesses with the exception of essential workers after the project begin, will repaving continue? So I think that's a relevant question considering new orders from the governor that just came down today, how will social distancing requirements impact the work for the BSS crews?
During the whole pandemic, we have actually been out doing works on major thoroughfares such as this one here. It's been a little easier because there's been less traffic. Our crews are wearing face masks and practicing social distancing. One of the things I do when I go out during the day and I see the crews, I'm making sure that they're practicing social distancing and everyone has on their mask, but the work will continue even during the stay-at-home order.
Great. So it sounds like you guys will be out there despite those things, and the work will not slow down. Okay.
No, not at all. We will be there, and we're going to proceed on despite the stay-at-home order. And as a group, we're going to do our best to practice social distancing while we're getting the project done.
Fantastic. It's great to hear. So I know that we also have representatives from DWP here, and I want to make sure that folks who attended tonight and are watching have the benefit of hearing directly from them. I want to introduce Rick Butler and Denise Gardner. And Rick and Denise, could you maybe just tell the group a little bit about what DWP is doing, and maybe what, if you see some sort of schedule in mind, or what we might be able to expect in the coming months from your department?
Certainly. Our project is going to affect the west side of Broadway from Century south to approximately 109th or 102nd Street. We have approximately about 3,900 pipe that we have to replace.
Sorry to interrupt you, Rick. It's a little tough to hear you.
Okay.
There we go. I think that was a lot better. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we have about 3,900 feet of pipe that we need to be replaced. We hope that the COVID will kind of slow down. We're currently on a rotating work shift, but we will make adjustments to facilitate that project and try and get out of there long before December. We don't foresee it going that long, but there's always that possibility. Yes, there will be street signs posted there controlling traffic. Controlling parking. No parking signs from 6:30 to 4, Monday through Saturday. We may not be out there every Saturday, but as work permits, we plan on being out there. We do not want to tow cars. We're going to make every effort to identify who the owner of the vehicle is and try and work with the community to make sure we get the vehicles moved. One of the things I would like to say is that if you see us coming, make sure you move your vehicles. That way we don't have to tow them, because we really don't want to. Other than that, I don't see any real issues. Hopefully that we can get past the high school there in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and we won't impact the school too much.
Great.
Just to chime in on what Rick said there in regards to towing vehicles. The Streets LA team, we don't want to tow either, and we'll take every effort not to tow, but it gets to the point where we may have to tow, but we're going to do all we can not to do any towing. And that's why we do the heavy outreach that we do to let the constituents know that we are going to be out there to help eliminate some of that.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for that information. So we have another question that I think might be directed towards Streets LA, but maybe not your sort of expertise, Michael. Mrs. Rutledge is asking about budgets for cleaning on main corridors, and is there a budget right now for maintenance for Broadway and other corridors in the area? I know that you're sort of with the implementation team, but maybe you can offer us some insight, or maybe even Albie or Lamont, you can talk to us a little bit about the budgeting process as you guys see it.
I can say I'm not 100% accurate on what the budget is for major thoroughfares and sweeping. I know at one point those major thoroughfares were swept in the early morning hours, but as the communities and streets have been more inundated with vehicles, it's become more and more difficult to do so. I know there isn't a budget to post signs right now for cleaning on major thoroughfares, but I know they do make an effort to get out and do what they can do. And what that frequency is right now, I'm not sure what it is.
Our office has partnered before with neighborhood councils to put our monies together and start a program. It's something that, you know, we don't necessarily have a budget for right now, or something we don't foresee doing, but I think we're willing to start that conversation with our neighborhood groups.
Okay, great. So we only have one more question left. And this is Rutledge is asking about how possible it might be to get a public parking lot ready to permanently serve the community. I think you guys had covered this before, but maybe just a final word on that, Albie or Lamont.
Lamont, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So that's something that we can look at, and we can continue to have a conversation with you all about that, about what might be a good place for that. But I do want to note, we do have an existing lot off of 86th Place. I know it's not necessarily accessible for everybody on the corridor, but we do have one lot there. And we want to make sure people are able to utilize that, because I know often it's not full. So we definitely want to encourage folks to use that one. And then we can continue to have a conversation and figure out, you know, as Broadway kind of grows and changes, you know, does it make sense to add a new public parking lot, and then where should that go?
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions rolling in. I want to thank everybody for joining tonight. I know, you know, when we first were envisioning the outreach for this project, the rules were a little bit different about how we would be able to interact with folks. And so I want to thank everybody for joining tonight and for being patient with us. You know, I know it's not an ideal situation, and we know that we could be doing more to connect with folks, but we're trying the best that we can with the tools that we have. You know, you can look forward to more of these series. Most immediately, we're going to be doing the same workshop tomorrow evening. It'll be provided in Spanish. So if you know any Spanish speakers who would like to get this information, we're doing the same exact presentation, just in Spanish. And then again in the future, you know, once the second half of the project, everything south of Century, once LADWP completes their project, we will be going out to the community again to be talking about these things. So this is certainly not the last time that you'll be hearing about this project, or having the opportunity to engage directly with the folks, the planners, engineers, and people working on the project and designing the project and implementing the project. And then on top of that, we know that CD8 and MIG will be leading a series of workshops to be talking specifically about the public space activation portions of it, the things that are happening in the median, and those other parts. So we're really sort of at the beginning of a journey here together. And I want to thank everybody for joining in today. We will be sending out, we'll be doing a summary of all the questions that we did tonight. We'll be typing them up and posting them and sharing them here via email, so you can share those with your friends or your family or people who weren't able to make it tonight. And all of the information will be available on our website, LADOT Livable Streets. Wow, I'm blanking on my own website. Let me get that up actually, so I know the actual website.
We're talking about the Broadway page.
Yes, yeah.
LADOT, livable streets. .org. .org. I'm giving people time to write it down.
Okay.
.org/projects/Broadway. So I think we have it somewhere earlier in the presentation. And I'm sorry to strobe through this. There's probably a more professional way to get through this slide deck, but
I've added it in the chat as well. So
here it is. It's here at the bottom. I'm using this fun pointer, LADOT/projects/Broadway.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. Really appreciate it. And please stay in touch with us. Please stay in touch with CD8. We want to hear from you. We need your voices, because after all, this project is for you and it's in your neighborhood. So we want to make sure that it serves your needs and serves the community as best as possible. So with that, I think I'll let everybody get on their way and have a great evening. Hope everybody has a fun and safe weekend. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, good night, everyone.